Okay, so let's get started with video number 4, which is hopefully the last video. Right now we're on step number 34. So I did some of the ironing ahead of time to try to make the video go a little faster for me. So here we need to press the end of each of the main zipper panels to the wrong side by 1/2 inch. So how I do that is I measure from the end one full inch and then fold the raw edge into that line that I draw, and that's 1/2 inch in, and then press, and that's easier for me to get them all even. So that's step 34, and then 35 you're going to mark the center of your zipper, which I already did that too, and then also mark the centers of these exterior contrast main zipper panels and your lining main zipper panels. So here you want to have right side up, and I want to make sure I cut these so that they would go a certain way. Yeah, I think like that. Okay, so let me make sure that I put that right. Okay, so I want this side sewn to the zipper. I marked the centers on the wrong side. It might be easier actually if you mark them on the right side, but match the center of your zipper tape up to the center on the main zipper panel, the exterior contrast, and you want your zipper right side down and the exterior contrast zipper panel right side up. Okay, and we will clip that all along the edge. And I'm using zipper tape. So I cut a total length of 26 inches. If you're using an actual double pull zipper, make sure you get one that is at least 24 inches. If it's longer is okay. You just don't want it shorter than that. All right, one more clip should do it. And we want to base this zipper in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you want to start sewing, you don't want to sew down here on this portion of the zipper tape, so you want to start sewing right where the fabric is for the main zipper panel. And I'm using currently a stitch length of 3, so not your longer top stitching length. And you want to use polyester or nylon thread for bags. Nylon thread can melt if you iron it though. I typically use polyester thread for any of my fabric bags or vinyl bags. Cotton thread breaks easier, so you might, find, or depending on colors or whatever, want to use a cotton thread, but it will break easier, so I wouldn't recommend that for bags. Take your time so that the zipper doesn't shift and you end up with more length sticking out one end. And then make sure you stop right at the end of that fabric as well. And then I back stitch there. Okay, and did you see that I moved the zippers out of the way when I went past those, so that way your seam stays nice and straight? I need to get better snips, I think. Little spring-loaded ones. Okay, so now we're going to place a lining main zipper panel right side down over this, and you want your zipper to be sandwiched in between. So match up the ends of this zipper panel with the exterior zipper panel that's already sewn on. Make sure that your center mark matches the center marks here, which it does. So first I'm matching the end, the center, and the other end, and then I'll go ahead and pin between those points. And then, you know what, I like my clips to be the certain way because we're going to sew it from the other side directly over the stitching, the previous stitching. So that way you don't have any extra stitching lines showing. So neurotic about my clips. Does anybody else like that? Okay. So now we want to flip that over and we'll stitch directly over this same line of stitching in the last step. And again, make sure you don't, or make sure you, yeah, start sewing where the fabric starts, not just on the zipper tape. And make sure you back stitch that well. I watched back a couple of other videos that I made for this, and they seem a little bit jumpy, and I think it's when my sewing machine table moves a little bit as I sew. And I have my tripod situated in such a way that it's leaning on the sewing machine table. So I actually, my dad was just over and he had a suggestion about looking for some type of thing that would screw to the wall, that has maybe an arm that comes out with an elbow that I could place it over top my sewing machine. So I think I'm going to look for something like that, 'cause that would really be perfect, and then my videos wouldn't have that jumpiness to them. And really how I have the tripod set up is not how it's meant to be set up. Okay. So once we have both of those, we are going to press this. So I'll pause the video. Press the exterior and the lining main zipper panels away from the zipper, so they'll be wrong sides together. And then I'll come back and we'll top stitch here. So just 1 minute. Okay, I've pressed both of the main zipper panels away from the zipper, and they're now wrong sides together. Increase your stitch length to your top stitching length, which I'm using 4. And then you'll want to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch all the way along the seam where it's connected to the zipper through the main zipper panels. You do want to back stitch a little bit at the beginning, so just keep it neat because this is on the outside of your bag. And I like to take my time on this just to make sure everything, I mean, this is right at the top of your bag, visible, so just make sure you have nice straight stitches. And I like to pull the lining panel out as well to make sure that it's not, you know, pulling back towards the zipper any. And that everything underneath is nice and straight too. Again, I'm going to move the zippers out of the way so that it doesn't have like a curved area going around the zippers. Now we're going to do the same exact process to attach the exterior and lining main zipper panels to the other side of the zipper. So I'm excited about this bag. I love this plaid, and that just looks so pretty. And these are the zippers again from Blue Calla Sewing Patterns. It looks like metal, but it's actually nylon coil zipper tape, and I really like the shape of these poles. And her prices are good on her zippers. So, and she's in Canada, so you would think to ship to the US that it would be expensive or take a while, and it really doesn't. Let's see which way I want this to be. I'm gonna make sure my plaids line up. So definitely like that. Okay, we want to again match the centers. So the center of the zipper to the center of the exterior contrast main zipper panel. And then you'll also make sure that the zipper lines, or the zipper panel lines up with the other two that are already sewn to the other side of the bag, or of the zipper. And it does. So pin my centers, pin my ends in place, and then pin in between, or clip, whatever. I made new stockings for my family out of this same plaid this year at Christmas time. So, which I think next year, I actually made my own pattern for it. So the plan was to have a free pattern on my website for the stockings, but I didn't have it together in time to release it for Christmas 2018. So hoping Christmas 2019, I should have a free stocking pattern, which I know there's several other ones. So it's not anything new and exciting, but just my own take on it. All right, so now again, we'll sew this at 1/4 inch, and make sure you start sewing where the fabric is. I'll do a few stitches, back stitch, once you get close to those zippers with your needle, always adjust your zippers with your needle in the down position so that it doesn't shift. All right, and then also as you sew, make sure where the end of the main zipper panel is sewn under, or folded under here, that it doesn't come unfolded as it's gliding along your sewing machine. All right, and then once you get to the end of that fabric, don't go any further and back stitch. All right, trim the threads. All right, and now we will clip the lining in place, first by matching up the centers. And I'm going to sew it, let's see, with that side up, so. And then match the ends. and then match in between. Okay. Now we will flip this over again and sew directly on top of this line. Make sure you backstitch and only sew along the length of the fabric. When you get to the zipper pulls, with your needle down, move them out of the way. All right. And now I'm going to, again, go press these main zipper panels away from the zipper, wrong sides together, and then we'll come back and top stitch that. All right, so the other two main zipper panels have been pressed away from the zipper, and they're now wrong sides together. And now I'll top stitch that side. Also using a 1/8 inch seam allowance, increase your stitch length. And back stitch neatly, since this will be visible on the exterior of the bag. And only sew along the fabric portion, not onto the zipper tape. So that top stitch is finished. Now, step number 37. We need to fuse the main zipper panel support stabilizer to the wrong side of the lining main zipper panels. Make sure the stabilizer is centered and as close to the top stitching along the zipper as possible. So I have my 15-inch length of Peltex that I cut, and this is fusible. If you don't have fusible, it would work with non-fusible, but fusible makes it easier. So you're going to push back the exterior. Let me just clip that out of my way for now. And you want to take your Peltex and push it up. And I like to put it on top of the little bit of seam allowance that is inside there. Do you see that? There's seam allowance here, and I like to put my Peltex on top of that so it's as close to the top stitching as you can get it. And we fuse it to the lining portion. Peltex can get a little wrinkly, and you don't want the outside of your bag to have those wrinkles on it. So we fuse it to the lining so we get the benefits of it without seeing that wrinkling. Okay, so it's in there, and I'm going to go to my ironing board and fuse it in place. So the way I do that is actually to close this, because Peltex can melt sometimes if you put the iron directly on it. And then I'm going to press it from the top side, and then I'll flip it over and press it from the bottom. And then I'll do the same to put the Peltex on the other side as well. Okay, so I have my stabilizer is interfaced to the lining, sandwiched between the lining and the exterior. Now we want to top stitch 2 lines on each side of this, and each will be 1/2 inch away from the previous line of stitching. So we want one line a 1/2 inch away from the top stitching, and then the second line will be a 1/2 inch away from that. There are a couple different ways. If you are using a domestic sewing machine, the foot I use most, or well, like my wider foot that I use on that machine, if I have my needle all the way to the left, then it is 1/2 inch to the side of that foot. So you could do that. If you have a walking foot, they have a little attachment, and you could do that to measure your 1/2 inch. I have some washi tape that is just over 1/2 inch wide, and you can use that to just stick on, just so you know it's at a 1/2 inch mark. What I'm going to do, if I can find my marking pencil. All right, I'm going to just draw the lines on. If you do this, make sure you're using something that washes off, and draw your line 1/2 inch from the stitching line, not from the seam where it attaches to the zipper, but the top stitching that was at 1/8 of an inch away from the zipper. And I'm going to, you know what, actually I might as well draw the second line of stitching as well. It's hard with the glare on this ruler. All right, I'll move my zipper pulls out of the way. Hopefully you guys can't see my head, because again, I'm out here filming videos in my pajamas before I got up, or before I took a shower or anything. All right. And finally, at the end, and I'm just the whole time matching up my 1/2 inch with that 1/8 of an inch top stitching. And then here I'm matching up the 1/2 inch marks on the ruler with that first line I drew, which then the 1 inch mark should match up with your 1/8 of an inch top stitching. All right, and I'll go ahead and mark the other side now, so I just have all that done. So it'd probably be easier if I used a longer ruler, but I had this one next to me. Oh, these lines match up pretty nicely with the plaid too. One more. And this is creating the channels where the boning will be slipped in at the very end. That's like the very last step. All right. So now that I have all my lines marked, and I have a stitch length of 4, which is the top stitching length that I've been using, I'm going to actually throw a couple clips on the ends of these just to make sure that nothing shifts on me while I'm doing this. I'll do both sides. It's hard sometimes to do things way far out away from yourself. Alright, so those are all clipped. I'm going to do my top stitching, and again, since this is visible on the outside of the bag, you want to make sure you back stitch neatly, but you do want to back stitch. And then we'll close the ends of these channels up at the very end of the bag after we put the boning inside. So back stitch neatly along that line, and then stitch directly along the line for the length of the bag, and you're sewing through that Peltex or whatever stabilizer that you've used that's similar to that. And then these chalk lines, we'll just be able to brush those off when we're done. So just be careful not to rub along them much as you stitch, so you don't wipe the lines off before you sew along them. Alright, and then we want to back stitch again when we get to the end here, and just do so neatly. Alright, now we'll top stitch along the other side of the zipper, and then when I do the second line of top stitching, I'm actually gonna sew down the sides and around the bottom. Just do not close the ends of these two channels that you're creating. Trim these other threads here. Oh, there's kids screaming outside. These are not my children. Okay. Now we do the second line of top stitching. And I'll do that the length of the line that we drew, and then I'm going to sew from that line down the side and across the bottom to basically close. So I just sew using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along the sides, and then you can base the bottom using a 1/4 inch, just as long as it's less than 1/2 an inch. I'm totally doing this backwards from my normal way. Make sure the ends are matched up. And then we'll sew back up to where we started stitching that second line and use an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance again. And then back stitch when we reach that line. Do not sew the channels closed. Do the other one. One more top stitching line after I trim these threads. Alright, and I'm actually going to start this one in the bottom corner here. And also add an 1/8 of an inch up to that second line of stitching, and then turn the corner, and that way there's just a little bit less back stitching visible. Alright, and then just sew the entire length of the line I drew through the stabilizer. Since I'm finishing these videos up today, I think tonight I'll actually start designing the next bag. So hopefully I have that one soon. I like to give my testers a few weeks to get things done, and it takes me a little time, obviously, to, you know, draw up the design and then test it out and then redraw it and then test it again. Sometimes I do that and then I scrap the idea altogether. So we'll see, but I'm excited about it if it works out. Alright, so we have the entire top panel completed now, and I will work on getting those chalk lines off a little better later. We are now on step number 39, which is folding of the zipper tabs. And I already went ahead and did that part, but I'll show you. So the first thing that you'll do is draw a line down the center lengthwise of the zipper tab. You then press each of the long edges into that line, and then press each of these ends in 1/2 inch, and then finally you press the entire thing in half. So all your raw edges are inside, and you should have a rectangle that will slide onto the zipper. So I like to put the zipper in, I mean, you could put it in all the way if you want. I usually just put it in about 1/2 inch, so to where that fabric is folded. And make sure you have the raw ends in there. And then clip that on. clip the other end in place. I also sometimes will use double-sided tape to hold this in place, or you could glue it on. Sometimes that's better than just clipping it or pinning it so that it doesn't move. All right, and now you'll want to just top stitch all the way around this. Do it. I like to start on the folded edge toward the zipper and sew that first so that it's back stitched well over the zipper. Hard to keep everything out of the way. I guess you could also do this part before you attach the zipper to the zipper panels, and that might be even easier. Alright, and then back up the first side. There also are metal zipper ends. I think that's what they're called. Emmeline Bags sells those, and they're nice because then you don't have to make a zipper tab. This is definitely not my favorite thing to do. And they're metal, and they look a little, give you a nice finish. And for those, you would just fold your zipper tape back and insert that over the zipper tab with a little dab of glue in there to hold everything. And then they have a screw that you insert that screws into the back of your zipper and holds the zipper tab on, or the zipper end I think it is. So those are really nice too. And they come in a variety of finishes, like Oliver Hardware. Sometimes you have to adjust to make sure you stay at that 1/8 of an inch. And I didn't put interfacing. I call for interfacing on these zipper tabs. I prefer them to be interfaced, but since I'm using a home back weight fabric and it's already heavier, I didn't think it was necessary. If you're using a cotton fabric, you'll definitely want to interface it. Trim my threads. All right, everything's trimmed up. So on to step number 41, which is making the handles. So I already went ahead and ironed my handles ahead of time too. Let me unfold that and show you what I did. So your handle's 4 inches wide by 18 inches long. First I press it in half to create a crease down the center, and then I unfold it, and then you fold each of the long edges into that crease in the center and press that, and then refold along that first crease to fold in half again. It ends up 1 inch wide by 18 inches long. All of the long raw edges are encased in the center. And then we're going to top stitch first along the open side and then along the other side at 1/8 of an inch. You can put clips on this if you want to make sure it doesn't shift I usually don't have a problem with it. I use my longer stitch length. You can always add more lines of stitching to be decorative, like one right down the center, or a couple more, you know, just another 1/8 of an inch in from the first line. Alright, and then we'll do another line of stitching along this edge, the folded edge. Alright, and then I trim my threads, and we'll top stitch the other handle. I think we're making decent time. I don't know. I'm on the fence of whether I should do the rest of the steps in this one video or make it 2 videos. One last side. All right, turn off that little extra interfacing. So now we have both of our straps are sewn. Oh, we have a random thread in there. Okay. Now step number 42. We want to make the marks for where we're going to place our handles. So here's my main panel. And grab my ruler. I grabbed my D-rings too ahead of time for the connectors. So we want to place the marks from the center. Let's see, there are my center marks. I'm going to make those on the exterior so that we can see them. You see I just opened up that seam allowance and you can see where the center marks are. And then I'm actually going to measure and make sure that nothing shifted with the sewing and that really still is the center. So let's see, this is about 22 1/4 inches long. And so that would be 11 1/8, which is where that mark is. And let's see, the other side is a little bit longer. So, all right, we want to make sure our marks are at the same point, which they are. Let me measure this side again. Oh no, they're the same. Okay. And then I'm actually going to also measure this way, just to make sure those 2 marks line up, because it's pretty important. You don't want your handles to not be even. Okay, now from that mark, we want to measure 3 inches out to either side. So 1, 2, 3, and make a mark. And then 1, 2, 3, and make a mark. And do the same thing on the other side. and here. Okay, and that's where we'll place our handles. Okay, so take your handle, if there's a certain side that you want facing up, put it, you know, that way if you made like two-toned handles or something, which I actually have a little tutorial about how to do that. Maybe I'll do a little video on that. That'd be fun. Okay, so you just place it to the outside of those marks. So there should be 3 inches from the center to the beginning of the handle. And you'll just want to base that in place with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. With the raw edge even with the bottom of the exterior side of the main zipper panels. And then do your other one. Make sure that your handle's not twisted. Okay? You don't want it to be like this or whatever, so make sure it's not twisted. And base that in place. Okay. Now, base the other handle in place the same way. So to the outside of those lines that you made. And I just based it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we're actually going to not trim the bottoms off of this when we trim seam allowances. So that extra, if you backstitch this, that will stay in there to help reinforce those handles. Okay, and last one. Alright, and now just make sure everything looks even. Your handles are directly across from each other. They are. Okay. So now we go on to step number 43. Actually, I'm going to pause the video for a minute before we do that because I need to go feed my dog. Alright, I'm back. It looks like we're at 48 minutes in the video so far, so we're going to see if we can get it done in probably just over an hour. I like to stick to an hour, but we'll see. Okay, so I have here my 2 strap connectors. They're made just like the handle. So here you fold in half, bringing the short ends together. Bring both of the short ends into that center crease, and then fold that in half again. You end with a piece that is 1/2 inch by 2.5 inches. So then we're going to top stitch closed along both ends, or both long folded edges. I'm just going to sew right along the end instead of trimming more threads. And I use an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and again, if you wanted to, you know, add a couple more lines of stitching for decorativeness. Is that a word? Decorativeness? That does look nice though, and I do that sometimes. Try in my video to follow the pattern as much as possible so it's not confusing. Alright, trim those. Alright, now you want to press these in half. Let's see, I think I'm just going to finger press it so I can do it right here. Okay, and you want to slide a 1 inch D-ring into the crease. Alright, now you want to make a mark that is 1 inch to the right side of the handle. You could do it on either side. This is just for your crossbody strap connector. I don't think it matters either way, but if you have a preference. Yeah, so there's a 1 inch mark there. and then turn it around and on the same side so that they end up to be diagonal from each other. Make another mark that is 1 inch from that handle. Okay, once you have those marks made, you will place one folded connector. This might be easier too if you baste the ends together first. And again, we won't trim this out of the seam allowance. So if you baste this here and then backstitch a few times, and then when we sew the bag together, we'll also backstitch over those connectors and handles for extra security. So go ahead and backstitch over this a couple times. It's a little thick with the home deck fabric, so hopefully I don't break a needle. Okay. All right, and we'll go ahead, oops. Go ahead and baste the ends of this one closed. And then place that at that 1 inch mark. And you're placing it to the outside of the 1 inch mark, so it's 1 inch away from the handle. And then go ahead and backstitch through that as well. Okay, so we now have the connectors on. Now it's time to attach this to the bag. So we are getting close. So take your bag exterior, which was fully assembled in video 2. We did the full exterior. And you are going to unzip this main zipper panel. I don't know how well you can see this because I'm so close to the camera now. Okay, so fully unzip that. And then flip it over. Oops, sorry. So you have the exterior side of the main zipper panels facing the exterior of the bag. And you want to find your center marks. I don't know if I marked. Well, if you made center marks, let's go ahead and mark the centers first. No, I don't know what the easiest way to do this would be. Always mark your centers of everything, I guess. Oh, you know what? I should follow my own pattern. I don't even think we need to mark the center. There is that Peltex in here. So the Peltex is going to fit exactly along the exterior sides from seam to seam. So match up the very end of your Peltex to the very end, or the corner of your exterior main panel where it comes together with the side panel, and then match the Peltex up with the other corner and pin those in place, and then just pin everything in between. That's why I didn't have you mark centers. Well, I do tell you to match the centers in the bag, I guess, out of habit, but okay. So, and then bring this over here. Make sure your zipper's not twisted. It will look like that, which is not twisted, even though it looks twisted. And do the same thing. So bring the edge of that firm stabilizer into the corner and pin, and then do the same with the other edge of the stabilizer into the other corner. Your handles are hanging down between the layers. So here's my handle, and you'll sew it here. All right, just pin or clip all the way along that top edge. and then go to the sides, and starting at the corner, bring the edges. They should end up being, I think about an inch apart at the ends. A little over an inch. But just as long as it's into the corners, they will come to the sides evenly. So that's why it's so important, though, that your stabilizer pieces are centered properly on the lining main zipper panels. Almost. This is the part where it gets exciting because the bag's actually coming together. All right. So now that that's all clipped together, we're going to base this in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I do back stitch over the handles and the connector at this point also, because every little bit that we can secure those better is helpful. This can be a little tricky with that pocket in there, just to keep everything, the panel will want to shift up a little bit, so just make sure it doesn't. You can add a couple extra pins if you need to, or clips. I hope you guys know by now that if I say pins, I mean clips, probably. All right, I'm gonna sew this side first. And I'm using a stitch length of 3, but since this is basting, it doesn't really matter. Where do I want to start? I'm going to start on the end panel. So, just all the way around to base the main zipper panel to the exterior. And your exterior is still wrong side out. I'm sorry that when I do this, you guys can't really see much. I think I will definitely look into some other options for my camera, though. Because honestly, if I could have a few of those, what my dad was talking about, that attached to the wall throughout the room, then I could, you know, have a more portable setup and, you know, take the camera over to the ironing board with me or over to the domestic. Because I do like to make videos on that as well, just to show people, yeah, it can be done. Alright. As I sew over the handle ends and the connectors, I am back stitching. We won't trim that, so every little bit helps to secure them in place better. The connectors are pretty thick, well, mine especially, since I use the home deck fabric, so just be careful with those. Sometimes if my machine doesn't want to back stitch over something, then I'll just go forward over it, and then when I'm done, go back and go forward a couple times, you know, just stopping and starting. Sometimes the machine doesn't like to back stitch over certain points if it's really thick, so. On my sewing machine is squeaky. Every time I push it, I can hear it squeak. Almost sounds like a bird. like a marathon around there. All right, so now we are going to keep everything pushed down inside here. Get your lining, which was assembled in video 3. Make sure, again, that this is unzipped. Unzip your pocket. If you don't unzip it, it's going to be a pain in the you-know-what to unzip it later. Unzip it. Oh, and also, hang on. I did not trim these seam allowances down after the other video. And I wanted to point out that if you do trim your seam allowances here, which I'm going to, I leave the end of that elastic there just because when you put things in and out of the elastic pockets, it can pull on that elastic. And the more length left and the extra stitching that's through it will help to secure that elastic better so that it doesn't pull out at the top. Oh, that was close. Carefully trim those seam allowances down. At least the crossbody, sorry, I forget what I'm going to say. The adjustable crossbody strap should be a quick portion of this, and I don't have to do the final pressing. I am excited to get it finished though and get pictures of it, because this is the bag that I wanted to make initially when I had the diaper bag pattern in mind. But I didn't like, for the pattern, I don't like to use like black. Doesn't show up well in the photos. So I thought I would do one for the videos and one for the pattern itself. Sorry that I 90% of the time forget what I'm saying while I'm saying it, so. Now, it's not as sunny today as it was yesterday, so I have a window open and it's cool enough in my room, but it is going to be in the 70s, and I'm Fahrenheit in America. But that's pretty exciting because it is April. We just had a long winter. I live in Ohio. It's been cold for, it seems like forever, when winter never ends. So I'm pretty excited about the weather today. So as soon as this video is done, I'm going to get some photos of this bag. Leave my computer here with these videos uploading. Because that takes forever, and maybe go enjoy the day a little bit. Maybe we'll go for a walk. All right, zipper pocket is unzipped. So important. All right, so here's my exterior shell, my lining. I turn the lining right side out, or lining side out, so that it's right sides together with the exterior of the bag. The zipper, the side with the zipper, you want to be along the exterior side that just has the slip pocket, not this front pocket. And just shove that down in there, matching the right sides. And then the first thing you want to do is match the corners, all the corner seams where the side panel meets the main panels. And I clip on both sides of that first, on all 4 corners. Oh, I'm so excited. This is the part where I always get excited. Like, all that work's finally about to pay off and you get to see your bag. Even though it'll be a squished up mess. Oh, and this bag is a little bit of a workout to turn right side out. But I guess that's the payoff for no binding or drop-in lining. So, I don't know. You have to pick your battles, I guess. And this time, we're going to be turning a big giant bag through the lining pocket, which you could actually make your lining pocket a tiny bit wider if you wanted to. All right, and now that I've clipped around all the corners, I just go ahead and match everything up in between and clip all the way around. It's always a good feeling when everything fits too. Can't lie, it does not matter how many bags I've made. It's always a little bit relieving when you get to the end and things fit together. I've made my fair share of mistakes. All right, are we ready to sew this? So I have my sewing machine on a stitch length of 3, and as I sew, again, I will back stitch over the ends of the handles and the connectors. And again, make sure that that zipper pocket was unzipped. So important. I'll start at the end again. Just take your time because this will seem a little bit challenging. And we use a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. Make sure you back stitch when you start and when you stop. Make sure you stay at your 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you notice that you're getting off from that 1/2 inch at all, just kind of back up and go back to it so that you don't have a wavy seam when you're done. It's a little bit tricky when you have such a big bag to maneuver it. So really just take your time. It's probably a good thing that people don't see what the inside of our bags look like. Because I know I have back stitching and stitching forward to fix my mistakes or whatever quite a bit. And then I'm just making sure to remember when I get to those handles, and you can tell when you sew over them since it's thicker, just make sure you back stitch over those again a couple times. Geez, I'm getting off from my 1/2 inch. See what I mean? Just back up and get back to it. All right, and as you go, try not to get any puckers in your lining fabric. The exterior has foam and everything, it should be fine. All right, now let's see if I can back stitch over these connectors because that is really thick. Okay. I didn't know with the home deck fabric, I hate to not use interfacing on connectors or straps, and with home deck, you know, it's a lot thicker, so I was hesitant to put it on there, but I didn't want to not put it on there and not have that be reinforced at all, so I just went with it. Figured we'd see what happened. My sewing machine, for anybody who wonders, is a Juki DDL 8700. It's an industrial model. It says it's for lightweight sewing. I have success with vinyl. It does really well with vinyl. Cork, it does really well with. Thick fabrics, I have no problem with. I would say it's definitely not meant for sewing leather. I have sewn leather with it after searching high and low for needles, because they don't really like make leather needles for the sewing machine, since it's not a leather machine. And it can handle leather, some leather, thinner leather. I don't know. If you're leather sewing is your passion, this probably should not be the machine you choose. If you're interested in sewing bags out of vinyl and fabric, I think this machine is fabulous. A lot of people have industrial walking foot machines, which would be even better. This does not have a walking foot, but it's a great machine for what it is. I really like it. My domestic sewing machine that I have, which does pretty decent with vinyl and stuff too. Not as good as this, but it's not an industrial, but I mean, you can definitely make bags on it. I've made tons and tons of bags on that machine. It is a Brother PC420, which is the Project Runway edition. I've had it, I'm gonna say 4 or 5 years, and I haven't had any issues with it. I ordered it on Amazon. I know that, you know, people recommend that you get your sewing machines from a dealer so that you have someone to go to with issues and that can fix it. But honestly, I have 0 dealers around here. Like, there's nowhere I can go. So it was either drive hours to find a sewing machine dealer that had the machine I wanted, or take my chances and buy it online. So I went ahead and got it online, and I haven't had any issues with it. And I think I read somewhere that people were saying that the machines you buy on Amazon aren't the quality, that it doesn't have the metal gears and everything inside, and it seems like a good heavy machine to me. So we finally reached the other side. Okay, trim that thread. So we have now sewn all the way around our bag. Okay, so we want to trim the seam allowance along the top side panels only. So over here we'll trim the seam allowance. Can we see that? Over here. And along this long edge, you do not trim that seam allowance. Once it's flipped, it will help the top panels to stay up properly. So I just kind of trim down at the corner and then trim this down to between an 1/8 and 1/4. Oops. Wow, that was almost my finger. All right, now what you're going to do, and I'm not going to be able to do this on camera because I'll have to hold it in my lap. You remember where you did unzip that pocket, I hope. You reach in through that pocket and you are going to pull the whole outside of the bag in, out through that hole. So I kind of will start at the bottoms and poke this out the top. You might want to pull that front pocket out first. I like to do it in my lap though, so this is not going to be videoed. Just take your time because you don't want to rip the pocket open. So take your time and pull the whole outside through that hole. Okay, the whole entire bag is turned right side out. It's a wrinkly mess at the moment, and that's okay. So what I'm going to do now is go to my ironing board. I top stitch the bags inside out so that I can put it flat on my sewing machine and sew from the exterior. So I'm going to turn this bag inside out right now. I can do that. And then I'm going to go over to my iron and I'm going to press the seam where the main zipper panel is connected between the lining and the exterior. So I'll show you. I finish turning this inside out. This is why I'm not pressing the whole bag right now, because it's inside out. I would have to redo it. It doesn't have to be perfectly inside out. Okay, so I want to press, the handles will be up, this seam here, which is also here. So pull those away from the main zipper panel and press that well, and then we're going to come back and top stitch along that seam. Okay, so I've done my best to press those seams well. It's a little bit difficult, so just as you're top stitching, make sure that you're pulling that away. Actually, let me pause this video. I'm going to change my needle real quick for my final top stitch. Okay, I have a nice fresh needle now. Some of these seams where I sew over the handles are pretty thick, so I just wanted to have a nice sharp needle in there. All right. So make sure you're pulling the main panel away from the bag, or I'm sorry, the main zipper panels. Pull that up away from the lining and exterior of the bag. I like to start my top stitching on one of the end panels because it won't show as much as if you start your top stitching on the top or the front of your bag. Okay. This part can be a little bit challenging just because you're working with such a large bag. So really just take your time. Don't be afraid to squish the bag up because you are going to press it when you're done. So you might have to squish it to get it out of your, to be able to maneuver it. So don't be afraid to do that. Back stitch where you start your stitching. And again, I'm using a stitch length of 4 for my top stitching. And I'm just sewing using a 1/8 inch seam allowance through the main exterior panels and the lining main panels and the exterior side panels and the exterior or the lining side panels and the seam allowance, which is down between the two. And it's at an 1/8 of an inch away from the main zipper panels. It's a little bulky when you go over the corner, so just take your time with that. The handles will be facing up, not down, so you won't sew over the handle, just over the seam allowance of the handle that is inside. I hand crank sometimes over the thick spots, like the corners. And then just really take your time on this part. It's the worst thing ever when you finish a bag and you're proud of it and then you mess up the final top stitch. At least this is fabric, so if I messed up, I could take that top stitch out, redo it. When you're sewing like a leather or a vinyl bag and you make a mistake on that final top stitch, if you take it out, then you have holes, so that's always the worst. So just really take your time. Funny that I said it wasn't that hot out here today. Now the sun's shining more and it's warming up and I'm hot. Or maybe it's because I'm wrestling this giant bag. And you may want to hand crank sections as you go over the connectors. It's quite a few layers of fabric there. So again, take your time. And it wouldn't be this thick if you weren't using home deck fabric, so kind of did that to myself. Be tired when I get done top stitching. The end panels are easy. There's no foam at the top. Just exterior lining and then 2 layers of shape flex. So close. Alright, when you get to the handles, pull them up and that sews your handle down to the main panel. The other connector here. All right, and then when you get back to where you started your stitching, just back stitch a few stitches to secure that in place, and then we'll trim our threads. Okay, now I'm going to close up the hole in the bottom of the lining pocket. So let's go ahead and just pull that out. You can press this if you choose to. I'm not going to. I don't know how well you can see any of this with the whole bag in the way. Alright, so I have my whole lining pocket pulled out. And I'm just going to fold the ends in. 1/4 to 1/2 inch, it doesn't matter, just as long as it's all evenly pushed inside the pocket. And then as you push it inside, you know what, I think I am going to press it, so hang on, I'll come back with that pressed. It's going to be hard to do not pressed. Okay, I have the pocket is pressed now. I pressed the raw edge in by about 1/2 inch at the end, 1/4 inch, it wouldn't matter. And then you just edge stitch this close, so 1/8 inch or less from the edge, or you can hand stitch it if you don't want your stitching to be visible, but honestly it's down in the bottom of the pocket and who wants to hand sew, right? I don't, anyway. And this should be super easy after top stitching the whole thing. Just took all the little strings or threads coming off the fabric up inside. Trim those threads. We're going to now turn the whole bag right side out. I will press the whole thing well when I'm done, but I'm not going to do that on camera. So push your pocket down inside the zipper. You're allowed to close your zipper now if you want. All right, and then we're going to turn this whole bag right side out again. So if you have a sewing machine with a swing away arm, I think, so like most domestic machines have that, then you could top stitch that last part with not the pocket, but top stitching the exterior through the lining, or in the lining where I do it inside out. You could do that with your drop arm. Is it called a drop arm? You could do it with that removed though, right side out, like hanging off the side of a table or something. So the whole thing really needs pressed well. It's kind of a wrinkled mess right now, but here we have our whole bag. The top just doesn't have the shape yet because there's no boning in it. So what we are going to do now is insert that boning, and I'll just press the whole thing later. So here I have 4 lengths of boning that I cut to 21.5 inches long. My boning comes in a, I think it's polyester case, but the case itself is 1/2 inch wide. The boning inside this plastic piece is what we need, and I believe, and that's a 1/4 inch wide. Let's see if you can see, if I can get it to focus on this. Do you see how the ridges are in the boning here? It's stiff, it's curled because it was in a roll. So I place it so that it curls this way. So like the outer curve is to the exterior of my bag. So I just remove that casing, I throw that away, and then slide this into the first channel that you created, and it will go on top of that Peltex, which was fused to the lining. So let's see, just make sure there it doesn't slide under the Peltex, which it's trying to. Oh, there it goes. All right, and it should slide in pretty easy once you get past that. All right, and then just push that in all the way. And I'm going to go ahead and put in all 4 pieces now. So it'll be 2 on each side of the main zipper panel. And you're going over the Peltex. And I think if you had like a thinner boning, it might be hard to slide it in all the way. Let's just remove all our casings. I have seen, or I've heard that some people buy this type of boning without the casing, and that's okay. Since we don't use it, you just want to make sure that this part is a 1/4 inch wide. And one more. All right, so once you have your boning inside and centered, you will top stitch closed each end of those channels. So make sure that you're only sewing through one side of it, you know, that you don't have the other panel behind there. So this can be a little tricky to get under the sewing machine. And really, you could top stitch one end closed before you put the boning in. And I just do 1/8 of an inch top stitch and make sure you back stitch and keep it neat because it's visible. Kind of an awkward thing to sew. And you won't be sewing through the boning. I have sewn through this kind of boning and I didn't have any, you know, nothing bad happened. It didn't break my needle, so it should be okay if you do. But there's enough room at the end of the boning that you're not sewing through it, or you shouldn't be. It's trying to twist on me. I don't want my zipper twisted up under the top stitching here. Maybe I'm going at this the wrong way. Let me do this one first. Let's go back to that tricky one now. Maybe if I try it this way. Is that the way I was doing it before? I think it is. I did the other one fine. I don't know why I'm struggling to get this under there. Okay, there we go. Just make sure you're not catching your other zipper panel in your top stitching. Okay. Finally. So I am going to, let's see, trim all these threads. You know I can do that off camera. So what we're going to do now, let me get all my threads at least out of the zipper. Zip this closed. Nope, I don't want it zipped closed. Okay, take your bag and let's see how I can show this. You see right where the seam is and right where the end of that Peltex is, which you can feel. Go to the boning right at that point and bend it. Press the lining sides together and just really bend it well at that seam. And same here, the Peltex should line up with your seam. And at the edge of that Peltex, you just want to fold the boning on itself lining sides together. See, and I'm just folding it completely in half. And you do that on all 4 corners of the bag. And the boning will hold the bend. And I also took a piece of boning that I had in one of my test bags, but like not something you want to see, test bag. And I folded it back and forth like 100 times and it doesn't break. So I wanted to make sure that this was going to be durable. Something that you could put in the top of a bag. I mean, if you did need to replace it for some reason, it'd be easy enough to, since it's sewn in at the very end. But I didn't want it to be something that would break. So that is where the bag gets the open wide shape. And then when you press it, you'll press the ends in such a way that encourages them to fold down, and then that way when you the bag will hold that shape. See? And the ends stay. And now I just need to press everything well, and we have a finished bag. So let's go ahead and do our strap real quick, and I'll do the pressing off camera. And that's also why that cutaway of the foam was important on the ends and that stitching line, because it helps it to fold properly there on the ends. So let's do the strap real quick. All right, so I'm gonna pause the video. Okay, the very last part. So we are going to make the adjustable crossbody strap, which for the longest time, this was one of the most confusing parts to me. So I've cut my 1.5 inch webbing to 60 inches in length. I'm using cotton webbing. It doesn't fray like nylon webbing will. If you're using nylon or polyester webbing, you'll want to melt the edges just with like a lighter. You could probably put it on your iron, but I don't know if that'll leave melted polyester on your iron, so maybe don't do that. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, and this is step number 51, you press one end under 1/2 inch. So that's what I did here. And then we're going to put the folded end of the webbing, which you can unfold it, up through the bottom of a slider. And then bring that same end back down through the other side of the slider. As such. Okay, when you have it like that, refold that 1/2 inch and bring your slider so it's close to where you folded that, and bring it tight like that. So the fabric is tight around the slider, the fold goes under toward the long side of the webbing for your strap. And now we're going to top stitch right here by the fold, and then again on the other side about 1/2 inch away, as close to the slider as we can get. All right, I'm going to use a stitch length of 3, I think, for this. So just try to keep it from shifting. Right along that fold. I'm going to back stitch the entire length. I mean, a lot of weight will hold from this one strap. So. Whoops, and I just broke my thread pulling it out of there. Rethread my machine, scratched my arm with my scissors. Alright, so now you want to stitch one more time as close to the hardware as you can get it. I like it to be past the open end of that, or the fold, the raw end, but just as close as you can get it. And then again, I back stitch the entire length and stitch again. Trim my threads. Okay, so that gets us through step number 52. So now on to step number 53. We are going to, with your adjuster this way, you want to bring the other end of your strap and slide one of the swivel clips onto it. Bring the raw end of your webbing back up through the slider and back over the center down through the other end of the slider. Alright, so here is the point where you can double check to make sure your slider works. It does. It's adjustable. That's what you want. Okay, so now this would be the right side. Hang on just a minute. Alright, sorry about that. So you want to press this 1/2 inch to the wrong side, and then again 1 full inch. So I'm going to put that, it'll be just like this. And you want to make sure you're putting it, your fold is hooked to the back, so opposite of the side that has the adjuster. And then we'll do the same, top stitch through this 1/8 of an inch from the end, or the fold, and then do a second line of stitching as close to the hardware as you can get. And I back stitch the full length and stitch again. And then we'll do one more line of stitching as close to the hardware as we can get. Stitch the full length, back stitch all the way, and then stitch again. And we're done. That is it. So I totally should have made this last video 2 videos because it's pretty long. So I apologize in advance for that. If you are not in the Facebook group, then I recommend you join the Facebook group if you have any questions. People are always there to help answer. I have a great group of testers that test my bags. They are super helpful, and I check the group daily where I can help as well. So there you have it. Let me know if you have any questions. I would love to see your finished bags. If you use the hashtag SincerelyJenPatterns on Instagram, I checked that. You can find me on Instagram at SincerelyJenPatterns, or my Facebook group, which is just Sincerely Jen Patterns group. So have fun. I hope to see your bags.